For a million and to Harvey on McGrail. You did mention one thing about this man looking after doing the book on his mother and doing the book on his grandfather. Now, I have loads of witnesses here this evening, but I know I'm going to throw down the gauntlet to him again, because this man not only honoured his mother and his grandfather with the books, but he's also a brilliant writer himself. And a brilliant artist, by the way. But a brilliant writer himself. So the next time we're sitting here in the Coon of Jay, it will be the third part of the trilogy. Grandfather, mother, and then himself. So we'll have his own work. And that's, no, I mean that, sincerely. It's funny, you know, this man, Patrick Tunney, died in 1951. The last time we saw Sam Maguire, just for the record. So now that this book is launched, perhaps our fortunes might change this year. So with that, I'm going to hand you over to the author, because he might have some little insight for us. Liam Friel.
First of all, I'm going to thank everybody for coming out here tonight, for the people involved in the Covey Week, for including this in their itinerary, and I certainly very much appreciate that. And for Father McGrail for doing the foreword in the book itself, and for doing the launch last December, and for relaunching it here tonight. What I'll go through will be less formal than what Liamy and Father McGrail has gone through. We'll just give an insight into some of the stuff about my grandfather. I mentioned that last December the book was launched out in Castlecourt, because Pat Tunney, Castlecourt is the church in Castlecourt, in Derrykillew, and he was born in Derrykillew, which was their parish church. And actually on that launch night, my first teacher and my very best teacher was there that night. It was a special night for me that she was there, and sadly, just over a month ago, my great teacher and mentor, Liamy Mc Nally, passed away. So I suppose it's humbling for me to be, I didn't expect to be in Covey Week, as part of Covey Week, and talking about something that I had started to put together. And when I had started to put together, it was really a collection that the Friel and the Tunney families, and particularly the Tunney families, because I'm not a Tunney, I'm a Friel, so down on the mother's side, and you know, I suppose with that is that this is sort of Pat Tunney's life story, and it's humbling to be here in front of the people of Westport to talk about Pat Tunney. So the journey goes, you know, takes us back over 100 years to a small farm, and it takes us through the rich legacy that Pat Tunney left. And I'll go through the labour of love that it was for me in putting this book together, and the challenge that Liamy gave me in putting it up. And also actually I'll share some stories with you. And one of the stories is how the book, when it was finished, made an 86-year-old man cry. But also the treasure that it is for future generations. That when I started doing it, I had absolutely no idea or concept of what it might actually be. So Pat Tunney was born, he was my maternal grandfather. He was born in a small family farm about 10 miles outside Westport. Pat Tunney was a poet and a tailor. So that's what he started off doing. He was involved in the struggle for freedom, and as Father Liamy Mc Nally said, was involved in the district council in Westport. So he was an urban district councillor, and he was actually the only man from Westport, from outside the area, to serve on the council. He was cycling the 8 miles from Castlecourt into the meetings. They set up the Castlecourt Fife and Drum Band in 1913, and they had the honour of leading the St. Patrick's Day Parade in 1916, at which the O'Reilly gave the speech at the Octagon. And that would begin a life for him, as Father Liamy Mc Nally said, that would take him to 12 prisons, both in Ireland, England, and in Wales. So the first account of that was, as Father Friel said, he was taken in his pyjamas on the 8th of May 1916, when he heard, as he described himself, the black and tans, the march of the black and tans coming to the door. But I said to the RIC, but the one thing that I suppose I've come to realise was he had a tremendous sense of reality And there was never a sense anywhere that he was bitter towards the people who were on the British side, or the Black and Tans, or the RIC. It was as if they have a job to do, I have a job to do, and a mutual respect for one another. In Frankel prison, I suppose when I started doing this, there was an account that was in the Coroner Martin magazine that gave his account, and he wrote down history as it happened. And that account that I was familiar with in the Coroner Martin magazine come from the Mail News in 1917, where he published all of his accounts there. But in that, he described the morning of his arrest, being brought to Westport, being brought to Castlecourt, being brought by train journey up to Dublin, and he recounts as he was going through the Midlands that, wasn't it a shame that all the fertile land in the Midlands was lying sort of unoccupied, and that the farmers and the people of the West, that wouldn't it be great if they were brought from the West up to use that land? And it was 30 or 40 years later, that's exactly what happened. And the story apparently finished in Dublin, but what I found going back through the Mail News was that there was 11 more articles that brought right through his time in Frankel prison, at which people like Terence McSweeney, Wiley Collins and Arthur Griffiths, people that I read about in history books, but never realised that they were in the prison with him at that time. In 1921, he was arrested in December 1920 and taken with McLaughlin's bookshop in Westport. Their uncle Peter McLaughlin from Ochday the two of them were arrested, and they were brought again to Castlecourt. And at that time, I suppose this was probably very humiliating for my grandfather, was they put the Black and Tans outfit on him, and they put him in the front of the lorry as they were being transported from Castlecourt to Galway. And I suppose it made sense from their point of view, was that if they weren't going to be ambushed, they were going to be taking out one of their own men. So there was my grandfather, totally on the other side, having to wear the Black and Tan outfit. But in March of that year, he got word to Westport, and a letter came from Westport to say that there was a family emergency, and could he get parole from Galway jail, which he did, and he came home for 10 days. Now, the Black and Tans didn't know that he'd been released from Galway prison, so word got around that Pat Tunney was seen, I suppose, in the local area, and on the 22nd of March of that year, they arrived at his house, found him, and had him at gunpoint to shoot him at the gable of his house. And it was the crying of a baby inside that prevented them from executing him on the spot. And so the family pleaded with them not to execute my grandfather, and they, I suppose, in their respect and in fairness to them, and to give them credit for it, they did not, but they did go into the house. My great-grandmother, they hit her with the butt of the rifles, knocked her against the dresser, broke the delf, broke her spinning wheel and burned it, and they went up to the room to where my grandmother had just given birth to a baby. And they put the clothes off her and off the bed, I suppose, just to prove that what they had said was actually true. That woman was my mother. So I suppose maybe that's where the sense of connection comes for me with all of this. He spent time then in the Curragh prison and was involved. Once he was involved in the escape of the 71 prisoners, but I'd say he was very good at diversionary tactics inside. So I'd say while in the prison there was sing-song and poetry, whatever, been probably done to a very noisy level, and meanwhile 71 men were escaping outside. On the 6th of December he was released, and they went to Dublin. This is the curious thing. They went to Dublin to see the state of affairs in Dublin. So that was just when the treaty was being signed. Then he lived through the treaty, the Civil War, and the foundation of the state. 100 years ago in 1 month, he married my grandmother. Both of them were in the Crushlock Pipe Band, and they reared 10 children. So the income, I suppose, as a poet and as a tailor, and being on the run, was supposed to put bread on the table. And it's funny that two of his sons that still live, their accounts are completely different. One of their account was somebody told him to cop on and to get a proper job in Dublin, and that he could afford to feed his family. And the other one's view was that he went to Dublin to promote his writings, that he could get greater access to his writings. So the family were pretty much split, and so, but in the space in 1948, in a couple of years, his mother died, his wife was just 48, and his daughter was only 19, died. So a lot of his writings were, simply they were controversial and they provoked reaction, and some of that is covered in this book. When he died in 1951, the Mayo News reported that 1,000 people met his funeral. So, come up to the present day, and I suppose starting off this was all that we had. And I suppose Liamy Mc Nally encouraged me, is the way he would put it. I would have seen it as quite more forceful than encouragement. But this was all that we had, and also some handwritten poems that my mother had. And I suppose starting out on this was a task that at the time I had no idea where it was going to take me. But through the local papers, the archiving of the papers, through the National Library in Dublin, and some faded print, we were able to collect a lot of information. Some of it came from very curious places. A cousin of ours out in Derrykillew, Michael Hershey, had a collection that his uncle had handwritten songs and ballads from 1929 and 1930 in a handwritten collection from Chicago. So some of it was luck that I just got some of the material. And okay, so it pretty much was an emotional roller coaster, typing up 93,000 words. And there are some spelling errors in the book, but somebody said I'd much prefer that the book is published and that the information is there than anything else. So I talked about one special event. When this was published, my uncle in Dublin, who was 86, when he got this copy, when I gave it to him and he had read through it, when I met him again, he actually cried. And he cried with emotion that his dad, he said, people never knew what his dad's involvement was, and that nobody had put and recognised what his father had done. And you know something, he didn't even know it. And he said, I knew that he used to write a lot of ballads, I knew he used to write a lot of songs, I knew he used to write to the papers, but he said, I never knew that he wrote that amount of stuff. In fact, this is only half of what he wrote. There's as much more, again, that have unfolded.
Volume 2 pending.
And actually my aunt in Donegal as well, by the same token, said that she didn't know the amount of information that there was about her dad and my grandfather. So the copies of this book are actually in 26 universities and libraries across the world. So in Ireland, in Trinity College, the National Library, in the States, in Notre Dame, Harvard University, Stanford, and Capitol Hill, in Oxford, Cambridge, and in the libraries in Ireland, or in England, Scotland, and Wales. So it means that his legacy is accessible. It's also an authentic record that people would have of the original work of Pat Tunney. And also, I wouldn't have appreciated this at the time, but it's only from Friel and Liamy Mc Nally that I pointed out, is that future generations will use this as a reference book. But when I was doing it, it was not what I set out to do, and I had no idea that it would ever be used for this. This was essentially that we would have got all of our grandfather's works together, put them in one place, and the future generations, if they ever wanted it, might actually have it. So it is an absolute pleasure to let us include. I thank Liamy, and I know Martin, Curry and other people for having it included as part of Covey Week. It's a great honour, and it's a great honour not for me, but it's a great honour and recognition for a poet and a small farmer and a tailor who went on to become, I suppose, as Pat McGrail would say, a dominant figure. And I probably still cannot appreciate all of that. But I do genuinely thank all of you for coming here tonight and for making this another special event for me, and in honour of my great, even though he's just my grandfather, but a man that I'm truly proud of. Thank you very much.
Well done, Nick, thank you. I just want to say one thing on publications. We work with, as in Ireland works with Britain on one thing, and that is the keeping of books. When you publish a book, a publisher is obliged by law to submit what they call a legal deposit copy to at least 15 university and national libraries across Britain and Ireland. So every one of the books published will have to go to the Irish National Library, the universities, Trinity, all that, and the same in Britain. The British National Library, the Scottish National Library, and the Welsh National Library, Oxford and Cambridge, and then I know Liam has put some as well to America. So any book that's ever published, if you want to get your hands on it, all you do is go into your local library and ask them to get it from wherever, whether it's the National Library, they can get the deposit copy. So by publishing a book and sending it to those places, you make the book available to everyone in that country. And that to me is one of the great joys of publishing. You know that you're making something available. So as you say, this book is available everywhere. Everywhere. So well done, Nick. Well done. We're looking forward to either volume 2 on this or else your own one next, whichever.